The title of this podcast is Why Leaders Are Ruled by Their Subordinates. This is a fairly common issue, although it's rarely recognized. It certainly is recognized within uh, the hearts of leaders who feel this sort of imprisonment. It happens a lot, for instance, in medicine, as an example. Many physicians are uh, in effect ruled by their nurses. In businesses, executives are often ruled by their secretaries. CEOs often feel a sense of insecurity around certain employees. And within the mind of the leader, there is a fairly pronounced conundrum, and that is that outwardly and from a hierarchical business perspective, the leader is the leader, and the leader is in charge of his or her subordinates. Um, but this is in direct contrast to the feeling that he or she sometimes has that there is a particular level of insecurity or fear uh, with regard to one's secretary or with regard to a particular employee, and that leader often feels sandwiched in between these two ideas, one being that he or she should not feel fear because the person is in fact the leader and the subordinate is the subordinate. And on the other hand, there is an undeniable feeling that one is in fact afraid or feels enslaved by the subordinate. So where you have these two, a confluence of these two uh, contrary elements, the individual feels trapped in between them. It is very difficult, almost impossible, to admit to another person from an egoic perspective that he or she is afraid of their subordinate. And it is, in many ways, even more difficult to admit to oneself that one is afraid of their subordinates. Because once something is um, stated, either as a deliberate conscious thought or verbally to oneself, then it enters the domain of reality. It becomes documented in the fabric of reality. And once that step is taken, it cannot be reversed. As long as it is a passing thought, one can suppress it and one can deny it. But as soon as it is stated with full conscious effort to one's own self, then there's no turning back. And that's why it is very difficult for human beings in general to be completely honest with themselves. This is confounded by, and in very many ways created by, rules. So, why is it that fear of someone should cause problems? Well, the rules say that you are the leader and therefore you should lead. But the rules also say that you should be compassionate and you should be understanding and you should be caring and the leader should be empathetic and nurturing to those he means to lead or to guide or to govern. And whenever you have that many rules, one cannot possibly satisfy them all because amidst those rules, there are definitely feelings that are undeniable, and those feelings do not acquiesce to rules. Those feelings stand on their own in their own right. They don't succumb to rules. Only the intellect likes to adhere to rules. So, what is a person to do who feels a sense of fear of their subordinates? Well, it isn't a question of what one should do. Really, it's a matter of understanding. Because if you view things from the standpoint of what to do, then even if you're given an effective answer as to what to do, that'll only apply to a particular circumstance, and therefore you will need 10,000 different answers for each different circumstance, and that is hardly a practical way to approach any problem. Whereas if one approaches things from a level of understanding, then that understanding becomes pluripotent and it applies to all things. It's very nimble and liquid and fluid and customizable to various different situations. So the understanding is that first and foremost, it is crucial to be honest with oneself. Now, is that a rule? No, it's not a rule. It is a complete necessity uh, because rules are based upon morality and societal tenets and shoulds and should nots and uh, righteous sort of ideas. Whereas understandings, things that are necessary, are based upon the way things are. And if they are not done that way, then problems occur, not created by society, but by nature. So if one is honest with oneself, then most problems begin to actually go away. In fact, it is precisely because one is not honest with oneself that they are in fact afraid or intimidated by a certain subordinate that perpetuates the problem. Uh, if one is completely honest with oneself that this person makes me uneasy, even though this person is quote below me from a hierarchical standpoint, uh, the fact is, I'm a human being, and that person's a human being, and we're human beings before we are CEO versus employee. Uh, and as a human being, um, CEO though I may be, leader though I may be, um, this person causes some fear within inside of me. The very admission of that fact to oneself changes the game, because now that person is not playing a reactive game. Now that person isn't looking for a solution. That person is defining the problem. So once one is honest with oneself that this employee makes me nervous, then the the most important thing is to understand what is it that one truly fears. Well, this is where things become interesting. No one really fears another. Human beings fear themselves. What does that mean? I'll explain. Um, Human beings fear what their reaction will be to the reaction of the other person. This is what they fear. Human beings also fear the feeling that they will have once the other person makes the reaction that he or she is predicted to make. So human beings are afraid of feeling a certain way. If, for instance, the leader says to do X and the employee says, no, I'm not going to do it, that, um, that sort of, quote, disobedience uh, or denial of the leader will create within a leader a problem. Uh, One is embarrassment, another is the feeling that he or she uh, did not adhere to his authority. Um, that will then lead to questions of what he or she should do, which will then lead to questions of, well, if he reacts in a certain way, then will the reaction be looked upon as simply retaliation, or something that was done that was necessary? So a whole litany of things will come into the leader's mind. And so the leader does not want to feel cornered. The leader does not want to feel um, that his word was not listened to because that will create further insecurity within him. So, what we are afraid of, what all humans are afraid of, are the negative feelings that will arise from situations. Um, the the person who plays a sport, the athlete who plays a sport, the reason that he fears losing is because he he doesn't fear the losing itself. He fears the fear that, well, he fears the feeling that the losing creates, not the loss itself. So there are so many things that happen within the mind of a leader, um, that to which he is reacting to on a constant basis, that he does not even recognize or realize that he is reacting to, because the things that he's reacting to are never even seen. And the reason they are never seen is because he lives in a society, in a culture that promotes action as opposed to incisiveness. It it promotes prescription as opposed to introspection. It is precisely in the seeing of things that one becomes free. It is precisely in the doing of things that one remains bound. So if a leader wishes to create pure actions, and as a result of those pure actions, to live in a place of peace within himself, so that his actions can continue to be pure and effective, then he will have to arrive at a point in which he recognizes that every one of his actions are motivated by a particular stimulus, and that stimulus is within him. And in the recognition and the seeing of what those stimuli are, only then will he be able to become truly effective without causing turmoil to the maturation of his company or to his day to day existence. So it is precisely in the seeing of things, in the honest, genuine, natural, organic introspection, to discover what is at the heart, what is at the core that is driving all of one's actions. It is in seeing those things that makes a leader truly supreme. Good night.